What's going on, everybody? My name is Tenebris Infinite, and welcome back to Generation Zero. For today, I've got 6 new tips for you here in Generation Zero. It's taken me a long time to come up with these tips, but I think that these are some of the best tips that I've given so far, my dudes. So, let's just jump right into the video here and get started off with tip number 1. Have you maybe had a hard time with hunters? Maybe their melee attacks have gotten you down in the past. I've got the best tip here for dealing with hunters. Essentially, what you're able to do is you are able to dodge a hunter the moment that they jump from the ground in order to hit you with their melee attack. This is such an ultimate counter to hunters that it usually winds up with you being able to destroy them just off of 1 or 2 counters alone. With the footage here, you can kind of see that it takes a little bit of timing, but if you can shoot off the gun from the hunter, you can kind of set up a situation where the hunter will automatically start trying to rush you. And based off of that, you'll be able to time things out a lot easier, and then all it takes is simply running beneath the hunter as they jump in the air over top of you, and then doing a quick 180 to shoot them in the back and hit them in the gas canister and any other of their exposed weak points, maybe the tick pod, who knows. But this first tip here is a super useful tip in Generation Zero. If you've had a hard time with hunters, seriously try this one out, my dudes. But yeah, there you go. Tip number 1, ultimate hunter tactics. So for the next tip that I have here, this tip is super essential when it comes to any sort of urban combat or any sort of indoor combat in Generation Zero. Essentially, what you're able to do in this game is you're able to peek around corners. So let me just kind of show you here that I am able to see this candle around the corner when I aim down sights. All I have to do is kind of keep the corner post right in the middle of my vision here, and then I'll be able to peek around to the right and shoot at something potentially off that is around that corner. Now, the good thing about this is that while you're aiming down sights, this corner is still right in front of you, so it will 9 times out of 10 shield any sort of bullets or incoming attacks from enemies. So this could be really useful when it comes to fighting enemies out in a big city that maybe are stuck around the corner of a building, or maybe a tough enemy that's been hunkered down in maybe a military base like Muscadin. I'm gonna go out here though and kind of demonstrate this for you guys. Alright, so first things first, we're gonna show you an enemy that it's really easy to kind of practice this against, which is the prototype or military tank that spawns down in Ostervik. So this tank is really easy because there's a ton of corners around this area for you to kind of peek them out from. So you can see here that essentially this tank has no way of actually getting an accurate shot on us due to the fact that we have this corner here kind of right in our way. We're actually standing a little bit to the outside even, but these corners I've found are a little bit more forgiving than other corners in other situations in the game. Again, just making this a great spot to kind of practice this technique from. The added benefit too is that a lot of times ticks will not be able to get a decent lock on you because they won't have a clear line of sight. So it can sometimes be a good way of taking on a tank without having to deal with the ticks. Oh. So we've got some hunters here, so we're gonna have to move around. We'll kind of focus on the tank because we've done the most damage to the tank so far. But we might not have a chance to, depending on how aggressive these hunters are. Oh, and we got a runner too. Dang. Okay, so we're coming around to this far corner here, just to see if we can kind of peek this guy out a bit. Sadly enough, the ticks have been able to follow us over here, so they might push us around and potentially knock us out of our position. Oh. What's up, dude? Alright, let's take on these other enemies really quickly here first. Alright, we'll get a chance to show off that hunter trick again here. Alright, and I think that we only have this runner, and then we can finally finish off that tank there. And again, back to corner. There you guys go. Through corner peeking, we were able to minimize our damage to the most we could while being swarmed by an absurd amount of robots, and all the while focusing on the tank in the middle here. And the other thing too is if you guys are wondering how I've become immortal to ticks, I'm planning on putting out a video for that in the next coming week. So definitely subscribe if you haven't so far. Alright, so now for our third tip. Since we've taken a bit of damage here, we want to heal up, but we want to heal up efficiently. So one of the methods that you can use for healing is just spamming a certain type of med kit, whether or not it's the simple, the standard, or the advanced. But something that I've found that is a little bit more efficient is healing with the simple first and then healing with the standard med kit. And what happens is you get kind of like a doubled up healing effect out of it. So let me just show you here real quick. When you heal with the simple first aid kit, you'll notice we'll get a moderate amount of health recovery. But now you notice that the number kind of staggers its way up to the top. So both of these health kits are able to heal us simultaneously without kind of like overwriting the other one. So a lot of times you'll be able to save on med kits by just swapping between the simple and the standard and utilizing that to heal a large amount really quickly, as opposed to relying on the low stack size of the advanced first aid kits. So for tip number four is a little bit of an obscure one, but we're going to be talking about some hidden weapon stats here in Generation Zero. So I go much more in detail about these hidden weapon stats in my weapon tier list and comparison videos. So if you guys haven't yet, definitely go check those out. I've covered sidearms, SMGs, and assault rifles so far, and next up I'm going to be comparing the shotguns in the game. But for now, I'll just kind of talk briefly about a couple of these hidden weapon stats. So the first one we'll look at right now is Recoil. We'll just kind of use this blank wall as a little bit of a representation, and we'll just kind of go ham with the clock here to see how its recoil is. So you notice that we were gradually going up and up with our shot, and our shots were scattering all over the place. So that is an effect from the weapon's recoil. The clock actually has a pretty decent amount of recoil in comparison to some of the other handguns in the game. So now let's compare that to the 44 Magnus. For the 44 Magnus, you notice that even though it has a higher recoil, the compensator that you get for it manages to lessen that recoil and how long that recoil affects you for. So the 44 Magnus actually winds up becoming the more accurate of the two sidearms based on that hidden stat alone. And then another one that's pretty easy for you to tell for yourself, but is another one of those hidden stats, is damage drop-off. So for damage drop-off, that basically means that the further the shot goes, the weaker the shot gets. And depending on the gun, will change the outcome of the damage drop-off. But one of the easier ways to kind of tell out damage drop-off is by just looking at the caliber that goes into the weapon. So for the 9mm clock, the 9mm bullet obviously is going to lose its power much sooner than the 44 Magnus would. So for damage drop-off, you can safely engage enemies at a much further distance with the 44 Magnus than the clock. Again, you know, just a very important hidden stat to keep in mind. Alright, so now for our next tip, tip number 5, we're going to be talking about hidden EMPs and how to use them. So hidden EMPs in this game are basically EMPs that are sitting out and about in the environment that you maybe have passed or maybe haven't utilized fully, as they are incredibly useful EMP weapons. So what I find is usually the best approach is to kind of make sure that the enemy isn't within close proximity of the EMP itself, whether or not it's a house-based one or a roadside-based one. So let's look at both of those really quickly here. So house EMPs are the easiest to find and the easiest to utilize, in my opinion, as a lot of times you can kind of catch enemies out as they're running around the corner, and sometimes you'll even catch enemies even further than that. For example, there's this tick all the way over there, so let's shoot this box and you'll notice that it will actually take out that tick there. Holy shit, that blew up way more than I expected. Alright, but as you can see here, the tick is totally dead from that, as was I. So you do need to be careful a little bit for collateral damage. I can say that that's the first time that that's ever happened to me, where it's blown up a car right next to me. Maybe that car's managed to get shot or something like that somewhere along the way while I've been fighting here in Hegaboda, but that's ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, house EMPs are super useful. They have a crazy long range here. You can kind of see how far that shockwave reached out there. It was really quick, but the shockwave reaches probably about to this tree here from the EMP. So that's a very large radius that you get to utilize in order to take out enemies. And again, another useful thing about it, I thought that that guy was inside a house, but another useful thing about the house EMPs is that if there are ticks inside of the house, it'll destroy the ticks before you go inside, so you can loot freely without having the little buggers jump on your face. And then the next area-based EMP is the box EMP. And this one's my favorite because of a little glitch that happens whenever you destroy it, which I'll show off in a second, hopefully. But this box is a little bit more difficult to use than the house ones because it's a little bit more particular in where it spawns. But if you can find it spawned on the side of a street or something like that, it's your best friend. So this EMP has a much larger radius than the house EMP does. And also, it's a stronger EMP, so it's able to take down the bigger enemies for much longer than the house EMP does. And then, lastly, to top it off, dang, the glitch didn't happen. But from time to time, when you blow up this guy, this door here will just go spinning like crazy, and it'll just spin everywhere, and it's possibly one of the best things in Generation Zero. day. This tip's a lot of fun because it's based on the new latest update that came out for the game. So essentially what you're able to do is you're able to use the tank's charge attack against it. It only took me a couple days to figure this one out, but it's incredibly useful. So we're just gonna wait for this guy to kind of stop walking here. And then we're gonna shoot off his weapons, and I will kind of demonstrate how he makes a whole bunch of blind spots for himself by doing his charge attack. Luckily enough, we're our vanguard here, so we happen to be impervious to his tips. Again, though, it's good to shoot off the tech pod from him. Otherwise, he might prioritize laying ticks over doing his charge attack. There we go. So the thing you want to listen for is this kind of roar thing that he does. Come on, buddy. Oh, he didn't do the roar thing, but as you saw, with a bit of clean time, you're able to dodge him. And when you dodge him, you're completely behind him, so he's opened up all of his weak spots back there. So again, let's try to get him to do it again. Hopefully he'll make the roar. Come on. There we go. So that's really what you want to listen for, because that's going to be the ultimate tell sign that he's going to do his charge. Sometimes he'll do more of a kind of murr noise like what he made there, but either way, when you hear that noise, it generally means he's going to run. Also, it seems like the tanks don't use their stomp attack as much anymore, so you can generally walk around them pretty close nowadays. You do have to be careful about the gas. You can get right up in their face, and that's pretty nice. Oh, fuck yeah, we also got ourselves some EMP rounds. So there you guys go, 6 new tips and tricks for Generation Zero here. Some tactics, some strategies, and some explanations for you dudes. So with this, I've now put out 30 tips for this game in total. That's a lot of tips, my dudes. So if any of you guys haven't watched my previous tips videos on pro tips, intermediate tips, and beginner tips, definitely go off and watch those, check them out. All of the information I've given so far is still applicable in this game, from stealth walking to dodging bullets to enduring melee attacks and now even countering the hunters. So I think that this is a good send-off point here to leave things off at for a little while. And next up, I'm going to be focusing on the story of Generation Zero. So I'm going to be doing an in-depth explanation of everything from before the fall of Sweden to the point where, spoilers, you take down one of the big AI bots at the end of the game. So I think that that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of work, but I am super stoked to do it. And in the meantime, next week we'll have 2 more weapons testing videos, checking out the shotguns and then the hunting rifles. And yeah, then hopefully we'll be starting off with the prelude of the story explanations. So hopefully you guys will support me as I go through and break down the story of this game bit by bit. But thank you so much for watching this tips video here. Woot for 30, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.